Welcome to Finding You Now. I'm your host, Amanda Ashworth, and on today's show, we have Natassia Dsouz. Natassia is not just a weight coach, she's also an emotional weight coach, which it really takes an holistic approach to weight loss and the mindset around it. And I'm really excited to delve deeper into Natassia's story and also the work that she does with women. So, welcome, Natassia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me.
Oh, you're more than pleasure. So I met Natassia recently when I was doing her summer challenge. And what I really loved about it is it was so much more than the scales, basically.
Yeah,
And taking an approach to it from the healthy eating and the tracking, to getting your steps in and prioritizing your sleep. Um,
100%. Yeah.
it was incredible, but also coming together as a community of women as well.
Yeah, I think for me, what was so important is that no one seen the challenge as a quick fix, but rather as a Kickstarter to just kind of get you started on things that you've always been thinking of. Maybe I should get my steps in a bit more. Maybe I should drink a little bit more water. Maybe I should sleep a little bit more. And we think about these things, we read about them and how they're important for us. But for some reason or some shape or form, we go back to our own habits. So that's what I wanted. And I told Kelly, I was like, I just want this to be a Kickstarter so that people feel a little bit more encouraged, a little bit more motivated to keep moving forward and get to where their goals align with.
Okay, amazing. So, should we take it right back and start from the beginning? Do you want to,
Yeah.
at what point were you aware that there may be a weight issue or that you had an issue with food?
The issue with food came a bit later on in life, but the weight issue was always brought to my attention as a child. My mom and dad would always say, "Oh, she's a big girl and she's really big." And I had just mentioned this recently, but my mom would always say, "Oh yeah, I know my daughter's big." People always tell me when we go travel somewhere that we'll take your luggage, you carry your daughter because that's how big she is, and
Right.
that was. So it was always a topic of conversation. Oh, your chubby cheeks, and oh, she's growing up to be really big. And if you were smaller, you should play more. If you were smaller, you would be so much more prettier. So I always knew. I mean,
Yeah.
it was done so often that it became my norm, and I thought that was normal. That was just my identity. That's when I knew I was bigger. I obviously started noticing it much more when I would be compared to my friends in high school and school. And, obviously kids can be so cruel at times and poking fun and saying, "Oh, you're fat, you're this, you're that." I still never realized that I looked at food very differently, but I definitely was very aware of the fact that I was a big child. I was bigger in comparison to those around me. My sister was quite small as well, so that comparison was always there. Um, and then the issue with food that I started noticing personally came along only in my late 20s. I never
Okay.
realized I had an obsession with food. I always thought I'm just a big child. I'm just fat. I'm just big. I believed what I was told by community, by society, but I never knew the deep rooted cause of the issue.
And so, looking back now at photos, can you relate to that identity you attached to yourself?
I I can't relate, but I do look back at the pictures sometimes and I try to place myself in that mindset. And I just feel sorry for her. You know, I feel sorry that I can't believe I'm crying, but I just feel sorry that she was told such lies.
Yeah.
I feel sorry that no one was there for her. It's hard. It's hard as an adult now because I just want to hug her. You know,
Mm.
I just want to tell her it's going to be okay, but that wasn't the case. But now looking back at those pictures, um, I'm sorry, I didn't think I'd cry
No.
so early on. It's just no one's ever asked me that before, and I um I just want to hug her. I just want to hug her and tell her everything's going to be okay, because that's all that she wanted to hear, but never heard.
I think it was a real generational thing. So my mum and my grandma used to do the same with me. That um, I was a small baby, but I had a bigger frame, and I was never. Again, I hate using the word fat. It's a word that I despise.
Yes, I hear you.
I was never fat, but as I hit puberty and I developed very early,
Yeah,
whenever I would see my mum or my grandma and we were in a room together, there was always a conversation if I'd lost weight or gained weight.
yeah,
They felt that they could remark on it.
yeah,
And so I began from a very early age attaching that to my self worth.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
that
can
is the
relate.
biggest thing looking back of going, how was that ever acceptable?
Yeah,
I would never, and even now, even if I think that somebody has lost weight, I refrain myself from talking
yeah,
about the weight and just going, "Oh, you look amazing," as in, you're glowing, rather than saying anything to do with a
yeah.
number on the scales.
Yeah, and and I'm the exact same way as well. As much as I am a weight loss coach, I'm also an emotional eating coach, and I have friends of mine that go through their personal weight loss journeys, and I will always say, "You look amazing," and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm trying to lose weight," and only if they mention it will I be like, "You know what? I do notice it. You actually, whatever you're doing is working amazingly for you," because I don't want ever feel like their sense of value or worth, or the reason they're feeling like their best selves, is because a number on the scale is defining that. But if they're willing to showcase that as, yes, I actually have lost weight and that's what's making me feel so confident and proud, then of course I will acknowledge that for you, right? But you're not the best version of yourself because you look the best or because you've lost all the weight, right? And that's something that we tend to forget. That's something that people put all their self-value, self-esteem, and self-worth on the weight, on their number on the scale, that not enough of us are out there that acknowledge all the other qualities and criterias as well.
I was speaking to my partner about this earlier, and I was saying, I was talking about the conversation we were going to have today, and I said, what I find really incredible is men, none of their self worth is attached to their weight. But for a woman, it can be a massive part of her identity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's what we see on social media. It's what we see in the magazines. It's what we see in the TV, right? And of course, media has changed drastically since then. You see episodes now of bigger women, being shown as the main host of the show or the lead character, whereas in the past you would never see those things. A person who was bigger, or a person who didn't dress to the ideal, or wasn't up to the perfect body image, was not a lead character, was not seen on the cover of magazines. But now you have amazing models, you have amazing TV hosts, you have main actresses in shows that are showcasing themselves as bigger individuals, and it is becoming a bit more accepting. But for years we were made to believe that was the ideal. The skinny
Mm,
was the ideal. I would remember my dad, when we would be watching TV, he'd be like, look at her arms. If we'd be watching a movie, he's like, those are the kind of arms you should have. Imagine how much she works out to look like that. Only if you look like that will you ever be on TV. Those are my father's words to me.
right.
And then of course you can imagine how many other people out there thinking the exact same, and then ingraining those thoughts into their kids, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's
So going back to your kind of teenage years, was it gradual that the weight piled on, or
Yeah, the weight piled on. So I was always a bigger child growing up. The weight piled on, I guess, to a mass extreme between, let's say, 10 to about 18. When I
okay.
was 18, I was already tipping over 300 pounds. But I never stepped on the scale then. I just knew I was bigger. I was no longer fitting into clothes in regular stores. I was always in the plus size section. Um, my clothes were, I was the biggest one in my household. I was the biggest one in any party that I walked into. That's when they primarily started packing on. And if I look back now, because I get flash memories, and my therapist calls it penny drop moments. I get these memories of I'd be sitting on the table and just eating, and I'd want to go back and eat more. Or I'd get these memories of my parents going away somewhere, and I'll just go back into the kitchen to eat, or just going through all the cupboards and just wanting to eat a lot of things. And I get those memories back right now. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize it was happening. It was happening every single day, every single moment of silence. And I never understood. I never understood what was going on.
And was there a reason behind you eating like that?
Yes. So now, having done the work and having, I always say, coming to the other side, I'm on this new side of life right now. It I was a binge eater. So basically, binge eating is eating to the point of no control, eating to the point of beyond capacity, eating to the point of fullness, of sickness. I had dealt with a lot of trauma, sexual trauma as a child at three different ages, and it it's now my understanding that my way of coping with those feelings of disgust, feelings of lack of self-worth, feelings of being touched in an inappropriate manner from strangers, um, that's the feelings that were coming up, and they kept coming up, but I didn't know how to deal with them. I always thought what happened happened, and you just get over those things. They
Yeah.
don't play they don't play a role in your future. Things happen in life and you get over it. I was never under the understanding or the impression that actually when you've been through something of such high impact, you hold on to it. And you
Yeah.
hold on to it as a manner of security, as a manner of safety, as a manner of, the binge eating then became a coping mechanism to cope with those feelings. And I never knew that. And I don't blame my family or my surrounding in any way for not being able to teach me that, but they didn't have that kind of knowledge as well, right?
No.
They were not exposed to what had happened to me, or what the therapy, what education would have been required for a young girl going through that to come to the other side. And the lack of knowledge there impacted my life in such a negative manner that food was my coping mechanism, right?
And did you use food almost to numb the pain, or was it
Yes. So
more? Yeah.
to food was to take away that insecure feeling, to
Okay.
take away the feeling of I'm not feeling safe. I my instance, one of my last instances of the abuse happened when I was coming home from school. And when I relate the two right now, it's actually mind blowing, because the time when I used to binge the most is when I used to come home alone from school when we were in Canada, and my sister used to be in extracurricular activities. My mom used to be at work. And when I relate the two now, it makes sense that I would feel unsafe as soon as I got home. And I would eat brownies. We would get brownies at the grocery store. They're 4 in a box. And I would eat 8 to 9 of those boxes as soon as I got home, you know? And it made sense because the time that I felt the most vulnerable and the most weakest was that one time that I came home from school. And that just carried on, that behavior of uncertainty just carried on for years. So I took that well into my adulthood of coping with anything that blew up in my face, right? That anything that didn't work out, let's say.
I think that's what we don't realize, especially if you've been through trauma or abuse, that sometimes you end up self abusing
Yeah.
and causing yourself more, like almost reliving it
Yeah.
and causing yourself more problems because you haven't dealt with the initial problem.
A hundred
And
percent.
food can be such a crutch.
Yes.
Um,
It is an absolute crutch. It is an absolute crutch because I never allowed myself to really feel what happened. I never allowed it. It was only until very recently that I worked with a hypnotherapist who literally, I tell her till this day that she's literally changed my life, right? Because we had to go back to the actual instance of when it happened. I had never gone back to the instance. I was always told you need to just get over it. And the person telling that to me was myself. So when I replayed those instances, I realized that I'm actually safe now. I don't need food to keep me happy, to keep me going, to, you know, I'll be okay. But I till this day, people ask me, "Oh, Natassia, do you still binge?" And I don't binge. I can honestly tell you, I don't have, I don't have binge episodes. What I do have is the urges to binge. That urge when something, you know, out of control is happening, something beyond my control is happening, I get the urge, right? And I strongly believe, and I tell this to my clients as well, the urge to binge will never go away. If food was your crutch, if food was your coping mechanism, it will never go away. You just get so good at handling it. So it
Yeah.
will come up and it will be like, oh, I feel like I need to eat a box of chocolates. But then I calm myself down and be like, why is that? Is that because things didn't go your way today? Did someone upset you? So it's that self assurance, that self talk that kind of needs to come in now to move forward.
So going back to Natassia at kind of 18, at what point did you kind of decide, right, enough is enough. I've got to do something.
So at about 19ish is when I was 325 24 5 pounds around there. And I had gone for a doctor's visit and he was just not happy. He was like, how can you be 140ish kilos? How can your mom has diabetes, your mom has blood pressure, your dad has diabetes, you're just setting yourself up for death in the next few years if
Mm,
you don't change your living right now. And he had then given me this very strict diet, zero carbs, just a bit of vegetables, a lot of protein, this and that. And which now looking back was probably the most unhealthiest diet you could
yeah.
put on someone because the amount of restriction that caused. But I mean, look, if I hadn't started in that manner, I wouldn't be on this journey here today. So it played its own course. So I took the diet. I remember I took the diet from him, and to me, it was just another person telling me I'm fat. It wasn't anything about, oh yeah, I'm gonna really do something about this because you, as a doctor in a white lab coat, is telling me to do so. So I just literally took the diet. I kept it in my drawer, and something clicked in around the new year. This happened around November time, but in New Year's, something clicked. And I remember going to my mom, and I remember saying it the night before to myself that I don't want to do this anymore. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I think I'm just going to try. And I took out that diet from the drawer that he gave me from my bedside table, and I kept it on the side of my bed. And that night, and I always say this as my last supper, I told my mom to take me to McDonald's, and I ordered the biggest McDonald's meal you could imagine. Double a Big Mac, milkshakes, and apple pies, and the works. I ate the entire meal, and the next morning I told my mom, this is the diet and I want to try it. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to do anything. I don't know if it's going to change my life, but let's just do it. And I told her, she said, okay, what do you want me to do? I said, I need your help because I was a full-time university student. I also worked full-time at the bank. So my hours, I couldn't devote
Yeah.
anything to it unless she helped me. And she did. And she said, okay, we'll get your food ready. We'll make sure everything's in place. And it it took off from there. The first week I lost 6 kilos, the next week I lost another three. And I was like, okay, this is actually working in its
Yeah.
own weird way. It's working. And the weight just kept falling off. And it went from there.
And how long from that point to you hitting your goal weight did it take? And how
A
much did you
year and a
lose?
half. It took a year and a half. A year and a half for me to lose about 65 kilos. So it
Right.
happened very slowly, very gradually. The first month was the biggest month that I lost a lot of weight. After that, it was a kilo every 2 weeks. And I was okay with that. I was completely fine with that. It was some weeks with 3 kilos, but it was happening at a very good
Yeah.
pace and it was always going down. Um, and that for where it got me, I said, okay, I'll keep doing it. If this is what I'm getting, I'll keep doing it.
Sure. And then you got to your goal weight. And then what happened?
And then I got to my goal weight, and I remember going back to my doctor's office and I asked him, I said, look, I'm at my goal weight now. I'm feeling really good. I'm looking really good. What do I do now? And the doctor turned around and said, well, go and live your life. Go and do whatever you've always wanted to do. Go get yourself a boyfriend, go explore things that you've never done before. And unfortunately, that's what I did. I took that as my green light to now eat all the chocolates, now eat all the things that I had stayed away from, now indulge in all the ice creams, all the desserts, all the things that not that those things were bad, but eat them into the capacity that I was eating before. Not
Right.
realizing that if I do the things that I was doing before, I'm going to become that same person. And before you knew it, as much as I loved living that nice, goal weight life, it lasted for a very short period of time. It lasted for about 7 to 8 months.
Okay.
And it took me to a whole different new level of restriction, binges, fad diets, and it just was on and off and on and off. Like it took my overeating of what got me to my highest weight to now getting to a whole new level of higher weight, but through restriction and binging.
Right. And so did you recognize that at the time?
At the time, no. At the time, I just knew that I can lose weight really quickly. I was younger then as well, and I was like, oh wow, I could lose 4 kilos in a week if I just if I drink a green juice or I have a small salad a day,
Mm.
and I can lose 4 kilos and I can still look really good. And then I can come back and eat everything, but I can do the same thing all over again. And I didn't realize that what I was actually doing was putting myself in a binge and restrict cycle. That's all I
Yeah.
was doing. And now looking back, even though the diet in itself that my doctor had provided me was wrong. It had zero carbs, it had no nutritional value. I was losing a lot of hair while I was on the diet. But what it was also doing was triggering my binges in its own way. But because I couldn't binge on the good stuff, like I like to call it, the chocolates and the stuff like that. His words to me were, "You can eat as much as you want of the food on this list."
Right.
So I would binge on the meats, I would binge on the items that were on my list, right? So it never taught me portion control. It never taught me you need to learn to stop when you're full. You need to listen to your body when you're hungry. It never taught me those emotions that we need to understand to live a healthy, sustainable life.
Well, I think this is what's remarkable about doctors. And when you look at how much nutrition is a part of their medical degree,
Yes.
you kind of go, a doctor maybe sometimes isn't the best. If you've got a health issue, absolutely. But if it's around weight, seek advice from somewhere else. And this is so I spent probably from my mid teens to probably my 30s yo-yo dieting. I think I've tried every single diet
Yeah.
known to man. And, some of those would be going to like slimming clubs, which
Yeah.
again don't teach you how to eat.
No.
They teach you a whole new raft of like bad habits
Yeah.
but there's never in any of that any attachment to your health.
No. No, and even Weight Watchers, for example, I did Weight Watchers for a period of time, and I'm just like yourself. I've done everything in the book. I remember my first diet that my parents put me on. I was about 10 years old, and it was called the military diet. And one day you eat just fruits, and then the other day you eat just vegetables. And even Weight Watchers they don't even teach you about things like your hunger and satiety and well balanced. It's like, no, if it's not within your points, you cannot have it, because
Yeah.
that's that point value and this is this point value. Very rarely do you ever hear someone talking about, but were you really hungry? Were you
Mm.
really sad? Were you really anxious about something? Very rarely. And it's crazy because these are the things us as women use as coping mechanisms.
How many of your clients then attach happiness to that number on that scale?
Almost all.
Yeah,
Almost
because
all.
so for me, it was like, well, when I get to that weight, I will be happy.
Yeah.
And I look back and I was saying this to my partner. I was probably about 58 kilos. Still in my head,
Yeah.
I was overweight.
Yeah.
And I look back now and just go, I looked amazing. But because it was all in my head,
Yeah.
I could have got to any weight
Yeah.
and it still wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah. It's so true. And I my main goal when I start with a client is self-awareness, right?
Mm.
Being aware that you're so much more than that number on the scale. Being aware that you're a woman at the end of the day, you go through hormonal fluctuations, you go through imbalances, you go through water retention, you go through so much on your day to day that you have to factor those factors in. You
Mm.
have to. And I was guilty of it. I was guilty of it. I would tell myself, oh, well, you'll never achieve anything in life if you're not that goal weight that you were previously, which is such a negative
Yeah.
statement to tell yourself you'll never achieve anything in life because you're not that number on your scale. I look back at those statements I used to say myself and I tell myself, no wonder my clients think this way. No wonder they have these thoughts. And I never blame them for doing that, or I never, criticize or anything of that sort. We just learn how to do better because when you know better, you do better, right? It's a
Yeah.
different way of thinking. It's not easy for someone to tell you, well, you cannot value your self worth with a number on your scale. It's a hard pill to swallow. But when you understand your importance in other areas, it you can increase that value.
Yeah, I think the amount of kind of toxicity that can be attached to, that number on the scale, how much it can have a psychological impact to
Yeah.
the and it's the spiraling and the judgment and the guilt and you end up getting into this really vicious circle that you don't know how to break.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a very vicious circle, and that's why it's very important for me to, when I speak to my clients, right? I'm always trying to get cues from them on, are they okay? Are they okay that the number has stayed the same? Are they okay that they have put in all the effort this week and the number is not moved? And
Yeah.
as much as they try to disguise it, I believe I have a skill that I can break that barrier down really well and just get to the nitty gritty of it. Because if you're not okay, tell me you're not okay. Right. And
Mm.
I'll tell you why you shouldn't believe that. And that's what I'm there for. Yes, you may not be a pound lower, but you ate healthy every single day this week. You maintained your steps every single day this week. You showed up for yourself every single day this week. And that's what's important. The older version of you would have never done that. Yet you are
No.
here today doing that, right?
And I think so a lot of my clients, one of the questions that I always ask them is if your husband spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, would you still be married? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
But, women especially need to learn to have develop better relationships with themselves,
Yeah.
recognize that internal dialogue, recognize, what they are saying to themselves, because most of the abuse that goes on is self abuse, but we
Yes.
don't even recognize it.
Yeah. I always say we are our own worst critique, right? We are our own worst critique. We're so good at giving good advice to others. Don't do this, and you should do this, and talk to yourself more kinder. But when it comes to ourselves, we're like, no, you should have done that. Now, because you didn't, you're a failure, right? We're our own worst critique. And sometimes, most times, all it takes is getting an outside perspective, a coach's perspective to tell you, listen, the way you're thinking about yourself is wrong. You
Mm.
shouldn't be doing that, right? Think about yourself in this manner and see the response you get. And it's going to be so much better, so much lighter, so much more positive, and you're still getting the results that you want.
I think also a lot of people aren't aware of what they consume.
Yeah.
mentally. So whether or not it be television programs, magazines, social media,
Yes.
you know, I've heard from people that saying, that they can't go onto Instagram without wanting surgery. And
Oh
that
my
breaks my
God.
heart
It
because I'm
does.
like, you are perfect the way that you are. But I think, especially in the UAE, there's
Yeah.
lots of quick fixes.
Yes.
But what they don't ever do is they don't get to the root of the problem.
And that's the sad part, to be honest with you. That's the sad part. And the quick fixes is what makes me question certain things at times, because I'm not here for the quick fix, right? I'm not here for you to finish off in the next 12 weeks and get to your goal weight and that's it. I'm here to get to your root cause of your problem. And it's so important for people to be surrounded by the right people, for people to be following the right people, for people to ensure that what they're consuming also has an impact on how they see the world. I mean, I am now so quick to mute. I think Instagram creating the mute story and post option without having to unfollow someone is the best option ever. Because if I can feel that someone is triggering me in a manner that makes me feel unworthy or unsafe, I will
Mm.
just mute them. I don't second guess it one bit. I used to second guess it, but I don't do it anymore.
But I also think sometimes, because all of these fast routes are, kind of lose 5 kilos in, 6 weeks, and whatever, are sold, and quite often they're sold by people that are unqualified to sell them, who don't recognize the bigger picture. So this is, again, when I've had quite a few PTs that don't understand hormones, don't
Yeah.
understand the emotional element to it. And this is why I would always advise somebody to seek
Yeah.
proper help,
Yeah.
and to also, but to follow people and recognize that, you know I look at somebody like Jennifer Lopez, and she looks incredible for her
Yeah.
age,
Yeah.
but I think, well, that is years and years and years and years of hard work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I want to look like that, I can, but I have to be prepared to put in that years of hard work.
Yeah, 100%. But yet you'll find people selling you the Jennifer Lopez dream on the basis that you too can achieve that in a matter of 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Which is so wrong, because I have watched interviews of Jennifer Lopez and she tells you about her regime, and she tells you that she drinks a gallon of water a day. She has for years. Most people here can't even finish 250 ml, right?
Yeah.
They can't even do that much. Yet you're selling them to live, to be Jennifer Lopez, when you're not even giving them the realistic aspects of it. So you're doing it either for the money, the fame, the promise, which is untrue. It's mind blowing. It's mind
Yeah.
blowing. But the thing is that as consumers, that's what they buy into.
Well, it's easy money
Yeah,
for somebody,
yeah,
because so many people want to believe that,
yeah,
and as I say, because they're not looking at the root cause, um, and there is no attachment. So I was speaking to a client a while ago, and she needs to lose about 50 kilos, but without having a why.
yeah.
The superficial element is not going to be enough to get her to her weight loss.
No.
So what tips would you give to somebody that is kind of going, enough is enough?
The first thing I always tell people is I do this exercise with my clients, and it's called Your Future Self, right? And I make them write a letter to themselves in the future, and I have them include all components: emotional traits, physical traits, their ideal morning routine, their ideal night routine. What would they like to engage in? What would life look like for them? To create exactly what you mentioned, that why. That
Yeah.
why is so much more than, oh, I'm going to be a size 10 and
Yeah.
that's it and that's all. No, what is your why? Do you want to be a person that works out? Do you want to have a more active lifestyle with your kids? Do you want to go skiing and you've never done that before? Create that version of you. and then let's work towards it. Because if you're just doing it for that superficial element, that's not the end all and be all. I worked
No.
towards just the superficial element and I gained back that weight before you even knew it because I didn't even know how to handle it. So that's the biggest tip. Look into the future as hard as it can be and create everything that you think is going to be ideal for you, down to your routine, down to what your nighttime routine will be like, down to the snacks that you would like to eat, right?
Yeah.
Because the snacks that are serving your purpose now are not going to serve your purpose then. So tell your, when I look at future self statements, it's almost all the time that I send them back to clients saying, we need to add this, you need to amend this, this is not specific enough, because you want it to be so crystal clear. You don't want it to be jaded in any way for it to be like, oh yeah, it's just the body part. That's all I want.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest tip for someone. Look into the future, create that ideal version of you in every shape and form, in every aspect, your happiness, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and then start building the blocks towards it.
Yeah, so I've been doing quite a lot recently on identity.
Yeah,
So most of us have three identities. So you've got your cultural identity, which
yeah,
in some cultures is really, really strong, your borrowed identity, and then your true identity.
yeah,
So I would definitely say kind of when you hit 30, and more so when you hit 40, you're longing for your true identity
yeah,
and what you like and what you love. And I think it's working out all of those habits that and traits that you've just acquired from the people around you,
yeah,
which is why you say who you surround yourself with.
yeah,
You know, do you want to identify as somebody that is active and healthy? Do you want to live a long, healthy life for your children? Because most of us take our health for granted, and
yeah.
then it's priceless because you
You
can't get it
can.
back.
No, and I say this, your health is your wealth. Your health is your wealth. You take your health away, you have nothing. You
Yeah,
can't show up for yourself, for your kids, to the gym, to eat right. You can't. You can't. Everything's just taken away from you. The minute I speak to a client and they tell me, Natassia, I'm not doing well, I'm really sick, or I'm really ill, or I have COVID, or I have food poisoning. The first thing I tell them is, let's stop this call right now, right?
yeah,
Let's pick up when you feel better.
yeah,
My main priority is for you to feel better. I am not going to push your emotional well-being, your weight loss, or ask you on your measurements. It not only is it not fair, it's not right, right?
yeah,
You need to focus on you getting better, and then we'll get to the best version of yourself.
yeah,
Because it's like you said, your health is priceless. You take
yeah.
that away, it's your building foundation to everything else.
Yeah, and I don't think enough people. So I have two daughters, and so when I had them, I wanted to break that cycle,
Yeah,
and break the cycle of things like you. So, for example, my middle child is a bit fussy, and the other day she decided she wanted to eat soup. So made her soup. She kind of tried it and was like, I'm not sure. And I was like, that's fine. I'm really happy that you tried a new food, and I want you to continue to try new foods.
yeah,
But, things that I've heard you speak about is, the empty plate syndrome,
yeah,
the starving children in Africa,
yeah,
and just going, the amount of guilt and shame that as an adult, if somebody said I had to sit there until I finished and I'm like, I'm not hungry.
yeah. It's crazy. And if you see some of the patterns that people are and that adults are carrying in the day to day today, it's so deep rooted to what they were conditioned and trained as kids.
Yeah.
Well, if I ask someone, well, why did you feel the need to finish your plate? You were full. You said you were full 5 minutes ago. I don't know. I couldn't stop. What would
Mm.
happen if you put your plate away? What would happen if you put your plate into the garbage, into the kitchen, tossed out the remaining? Oh, I can't toss out the remaining.
Yeah.
But what would happen? It's bad. But who says it's bad,
Yeah.
right? And then when you really go down to the deep rooted cause, it's, oh, mom said when I was 6 years old that it's bad to throw away food because there's kids in somewhere around the world that are not getting what I am.
Yeah.
So I have to finish what's on my plate.
So I found since moving to the UAE, because in the UK, brunches aren't so much of a
Yeah.
thing, brunches
Yeah.
and ladies' nights.
Yeah.
And so the excess and the unlimitedness of everything takes a huge amount of willpower to
Yes.
go, just because it is unlimited doesn't mean I have to eat it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so you, I can't tell you the amount of times I have this brunch conversation with friends, with clients. I know I've gone overboard on them as well, but like, oh, that was a little too much for me,
yeah,
right? Um, and one question I would always ask someone if they tell me, Natassia, I'm going for a brunch, help me plan around this. And I'll ask them straight and upfront, what kind of brunch is this for you? Is this the food's really good here, I want to try everything? Or is this the food's actually not that great, it's going to be a bit of a boozy brunch?
yeah,
You make that call before you go. Don't
yeah.
go there and say, I overate on everything and then I overdrank on everything. You make that call. And we always in those excess situations, instead of just keep diving in and getting into insanity again and again and again, we need to just take a step back and say, okay, I've done this before, what am I doing now? How
Yeah.
can I do a little bit better? Right, a little bit. And that's where we need, I think most of us need to kind of step back, because it's like you said, it's crazy here. There's a ladies night.
It's crazy, but even like with the alcohol, I didn't drink that much in the UK.
Yeah.
I got here and there's a social event every
Yeah,
day of the week,
it
and
is.
your glass is never empty.
No.
So it's topped up, and so I decided in January to cut out alcohol
Yeah.
until my 40th birthday, which was this month. And
Happy
actually,
40th.
thank you. And then I didn't want to place a label on it. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to. So it's definitely, I know, changed my relationship with alcohol forever,
Yeah.
because I've decided that I don't like the taste of it. I don't like how people act once they've drunk it, and that would
Yeah.
be myself included. And I hate how I feel the next day.
Yeah.
And I value my time too much to give up those weekend
Yeah.
days.
You're, for me, it's like I drink alcohol like I'm drinking juice. I'll have one, I'll have two, and then the next day I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, you know? And now I just engage in less and less activities. I've not given up drinking, but I just engage in less activities, because it's like you said, the next day is a write off. And
Yeah,
then how can I show up as the best version of me for clients, for presentations, for whatever I can, if that's how I'm feeling?
yeah.
So a couple things here and there, that's fine, but it's I just I have to say more no's than I do yeses to get to
Yeah.
where I need to be.
Well, I think it's remembering on a daily basis, not just to show up for yourself on that day, that you're
Yeah.
showing up for your future self.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
decisions you make now are going to impact your future weight, your future health, your future business.
Yeah.
And you can't have it all. So you can't go out for dinner every night of the week
Yeah.
and have no kind of and look amazing, but then not exercise. And there needs to be a balance with everything.
Yeah. There definitely does. And I I tell this to clients, I tell this on Instagram as well. You have to plan for your success. Success is not going to, whether it's weight loss success, business success, whatever, it's not going to just fall into your plate. It's not just going to come there and say, yeah, that's fine, you've got it. Right.
Mm,
So even if you want to eat out, that's fine. I'm not telling you not to eat, but plan around it. Right.
mm,
Don't just go there and say, okay, I'll figure it out when I go there. But what if you're tired? When we're tired, we make poor decisions, right?
mm.
What if you're superbly hungry? Right, when we're hungry, we're not thinking straight, we make poor decisions. But if you
Mm.
plan before you get there, it makes it easier for you. You can
Yeah,
put your head at bed in your bed at night and know that, do you know what, even though I was tired, even though I had a shitty day, even though I was really stressed, I made the best decisions for myself. And that's
yeah,
what gives us peace, that's what gives us solace, right? And that's what keeps us going. But oftentimes we just are so caught up in this lifestyle of we gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, gotta rush, and we're making poor, very, very poor decisions along the way. That's impacting our energy, our food levels, our exercise,
mm,
and then we feel guilt, and then we feel shame, and we're kind of living in this cycle day in and day
yeah.
out.
Although one of the things I actually like about living here as opposed to the UK is there's far less processed food. So although there's a lot more takeaways and kind of fast food is easier, that actually when you walk into a supermarket or you walk into a gas station, there are more healthy options.
Yeah. I mean, the fast food industry here is not greater or lesser than that, say, in the United States. I'm from
Yeah.
Canada, and it's 10 times, if not 20. Even the portion sizes there are
Oh,
ginormous, right? Like, you go to McDonald's here and you get a hash brown, and that's the size of your hash brown.
yeah.
You go to McDonald's New York City, Times Square, your hash brown is this size. Like, it's literally tripled in size, right? So we do have access to the same amounts of foods here as
Mm.
well. But you're right, we do have, especially now more than ever. I would say I've been here about 8.5 years now. We have access to vegan foods, to organic foods, to fresh foods. There is the option to make the healthier
Yeah.
choice. It's there, it's available. It's about the time and effort you put in to make that happen for yourself.
So one thing that I worry for my daughters is, so although the education piece is there, so although we talk about, being hydrated and about the impact of sugar and just being healthy, it almost feels like the food industry, it gets in at such a young age.
Yeah.
And so it almost feels that actually, because it is changing their taste buds and reprogramming their brains, and that's my biggest worry for the next generation. Not only do they have to deal with social media, they also have to deal with all of the hidden ingredients.
Yeah. And, again, I say this to clients all the time. I said, not only do you have to deal with your cravings, your emotional eating habits, your triggers, your surroundings, your environments, but you also have to deal with these large name brand companies that are paying scientists millions, if not billions of dollars to gear these foods and snacks so that you keep wanting more. There is a
Yeah,
reason when you put a particular crisp in your mouth, you can't stop at one, right?
yeah,
There is a reason when you put a particular chocolate in your mouth, you can't stop at one. It's because they have combined those salty and sweet fat combinations in such a way that you keep wanting more. So
yeah,
there is that element as well that you need to factor in, that maybe you can just stop at one because it just tastes that damn good, right?
yeah.
And combine that with your food obsession, your emotional eating triggers, food as your coping mechanism, you're not going to be able to. So
No.
that's why we have to limit that intake in a certain way, not restrict it, but limit it. But it's it and it's not going to change. It's not going to change
No, no, and
anytime
it's
soon.
gonna, it's gonna get greater. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was a heart surgeon who was saying that actually now that they're operating with more people in their 30s,
Yeah.
and type 2 diabetes is obviously, there are diseases now that didn't exist 20 years ago, and it's just increasing. But the I was speaking to a client a few weeks ago, and she had seen every single doctor under the sun, but nobody had mentioned to her how important your gut health is for your mental health.
Yeah.
And so, of course, if you're putting the wrong food into your body, you're not going to feel great. Your body isn't going to work the way it wants to.
No.
Your
No.
energy levels are going to be off.
Yeah. It's I've only started getting into gut health the past 2 years. Like getting into fermented foods and avoiding certain foods and not keeping certain items in the household, staying away from seed oils and things of that sort. And the change and impact it's had in my life, in my mood, in my skin, it's crazy. And I'm so happy to see more coaches out there now talking
Mm,
about gut health, teaching people about gut health, because the health system, right, is not doing enough of that. Is
no,
not doing enough of that at all. So I am so proud to see coaches out there stepping up and saying, listen, let's talk about gut health.
yeah.
Let's talk about your probiotics. Let's talk about these things, because it's not talked about enough at all.
No, and I think that especially so women who kind of as women, it's quite a difficult decision that we have to make. That, we get into our 30s and it's like, okay, do we have a child? Do we not have a
Yeah.
child? And again, it's all of those decisions that we've made in those years up to having it that we just take for granted. So, we forget that actually food companies are there to make profit. So they
Yeah.
don't care about what ingredients that they put
Yeah.
in our bodies. They don't care about the toxicity in our environment, and that actually you can live. And I think the amount of marketing that kind of goes into almost that kind of living a healthy, balanced life is a bit boring,
Yeah.
but I would rather take my health.
Yeah. It health is a priority, definitely. I I for one, my take on this is I love sweets. Okay, it's my weakness, it's my kryptonite, desserts and sweets. So, yes, you can make a healthy dessert at home. And because this industry is not going away anytime soon, and people are still going to incorporate that. There are certain individuals that are going to say, you know what, I'm going to go vegan, I'm going to go clean. That's all that's going to be in my household. But then there are certain individuals that are going to say, no, I actually want this in my household, but I want a healthy balance of it. So teach me
Yeah.
how to learn that healthy balance. And I think either which way people decide, whether they go completely clean, um, then that's okay as well. But also realizing that you have the option to have a healthy balance. Because
Yeah.
what I also tend to see that people that go really, really clean and then their kids are put into schools and things of that sort. And those kids are then exposed to these snacks and they're seeing their friends or their teachers giving them these snacks that they don't get in the household. And they then experience those tastes. What it could lead up to is secretive eating.
Yeah.
And I have seen this in clients that have very clean food households, but are secretive behaviors and are picking up within the children because they're exposed to this in their schools. They're exposed to this from candies being bought by their friends. And we're like, I don't have this in my house. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me have 5 or 6 here. Let me get some from the grocery store before I go home, right? Let me sneak some so that mom doesn't know I'm having this. And I think that's another side of things that people do need to consider and look at if and when they do decide, okay, let me step away from this completely, but factor
Mhm.
in outside environmental factors as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. So I have three children, and my two girls have such different kind of triggers for food. So my middle one she is a sugar fiend and she can't stop. So like if she has a packet of sweets, she will eat, or cookies, she'll eat all of it. Whereas my younger one can
Yeah,
save them. And and it's interesting to watch. They come from the same environment, are exposed to the same things,
yeah,
but you can even see from the ages of 3 and 5 that that's kind of in them,
yeah.
and that's part of their personality. So what services do you offer women, and how can women work with you?
So I offer women, I offer one-on-one coaching. I also offer group coaching as well. Weight loss for me is always a byproduct, although it is one of my main pillars to help people getting
Yeah.
to their best versions of themselves. And they can work with me either or option on a group coaching level with a community of women, or they can work one-on-one. And we go through emotional eating, triggers, where they want to be in life, how much weight they want to lose, and kind of just setting up that new environment for them. For me, the main goal for anyone that signs up with me is long term sustainable weight loss, right?
Yeah.
Preparing you not just for a weight loss program with me, but with any trainer you sign up for. You need
Yeah.
that mindset that you can take with you to any program, any trainer, any gym, anywhere around the world, and tell yourself, I can do this and I can stay committed to this and I will get off this successful.
And so if you were to give kind of 3 top tips to women wanting to embark on a kind of journey for weight loss, what would they be?
The first major tip I would give someone would be to find out what your triggers are. When are you eating the most, right? And find out why, what your triggers are. Before you start any weight loss journey, we need to first calm down the emotional triggers before you get on. Getting into any weight loss journey with triggers just keep going. They're just going to quiet down for a few days while you embark on this new journey, and then they're going to get loud the minute your back is against the wall. So find out what your triggers are, would be the first top tip. The second would be enough with the restriction. Stop restricting. I feel like I hear so much about the 500 calorie diets and not having breakfast and skipping meals to fit in things. Stop with the restriction. Find out what your actual calories are to lose weight or even to maintain weight. Learn to maintain before you can get into
Yeah.
losing, right? That would be the next tip. And the last tip that I would leave someone with is learn to love yourself a little bit more. If you don't love yourself a little bit more with the way you are right now, who's going to say you're going to love yourself when you get to your goal weight? The love just doesn't form. So learn to love yourself a little bit more, because if you start doing that today, it just makes the journey that much easier.
And where can people find you on social?
They can find me at Natassia Dsouz on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on TikTok. And they can also find me on my website at natassiadesouza.com.
Okay, brilliant. Well, it's been amazing to speak to you. And it's a subject that's so close to my heart that I could
Thank you,
talk about
Amanda.
all day. And if you are looking to lose weight, please do get in touch with a professional like Natassia,
Thank
who is
you.
who really understands the whole approach to weight loss, and that it is not just that number. Because I think that is really the key for long-term success.
100%. Thank you so much,
Brilliant.
Amanda.
Thank
That really
you.
means a lot.